Next thing that people said is it's really great that you started doing development snapshots, especially in the code-free stage, because that really helped us test things, and that helped us make some progress as well. And last but not least, we've also started to care much, much more about accessibility, and we also have a small but very active accessibility team that really cares for making Drupal easy to use for visually disabled people and things like that. So these are all the things we did really well. There's also a number of things which we could do better. A lot of people told me that they didn't necessarily feel empowered. They wanted to take Drupal in a specific direction, work on a specific piece of code, but they weren't always sure if that would be accepted in core by either myself or NG. A lot of people have obviously complained about the predictability of the release cycle. Some people said it's too short, amazingly. But there's people that said that, and for right reasons. And other people, most people said it was too long. 3 years was too long. But the bigger complaint was that it wasn't predictable, because people wanted to do planning, they wanted to communicate with their clients or their users, what the release schedule was going to be like, and they couldn't. So the third item is sometimes the lack of high bandwidth communication. I think WebChick did a tremendous job hanging out on IRC and being accessible, but even so, that wasn't always enough. People wanted to have more. Next thing is people said, it would be good to have better priorities for Drupal. And I think we started out well. I think we started the Drupal 7 development cycle with a clear list of priorities of the things to work on. But then as we started to enter the code sludge and the freeze and all these extensions, we sort of lost track, if you will, of what these priorities were. Too many critical bugs, already mentioned that, but when we finally entered the code freeze, I think we had to work through 400 or 500 critical bugs, which took a very long time. And then also something that people said is, performance felt sometimes like an afterthought. We committed big patches to the core, and sometimes there were significant performance regressions, and then we needed to go in and fix them afterwards. So these are some of the things that we could do better. So, what does that mean for Drupal 8? And so I'm here to propose some changes to the process. It's a little bit of an experiment, but I think it will work well. So first of all, I wanted to open up the Drupal 8 development branch right now, or today. Not right now. First, I need to talk to Randy or Amanda or Sam to teach me a few tricks. I'm not quite sure how to do branches yet in Git. But I'll pull aside a few people today, and I'll create a branch, and then I'll start accepting new changes into Drupal 8. So, as I already mentioned Git, so we switched to Git from CVS to Git. That's a big shift, of course, because it will enable us to work slightly differently. We'll continue to have, large things that we need to do, but as we do them, I'll encourage people to work on those in a sandbox, in a Git sandbox, and then I'll pull in bigger changes into the main tree when they're done. All right? And so they'll be done if they pass a number of gates. So we'll put in place a number of gates that we'll use to pull in those big changes. One gate could be performance testing. We need to know what the performance implications or ramifications are of a patch. Accessibility gate, there will be a usability gate, documentation gate. We need to update the documentation. Testing, obviously, we need to write tests. All of the test needs to run, and there shouldn't be any known critical bugs. So, if we do that, and all of these gates pass, I'll actually pull it into the main tree. Now, some of those larger initiatives, if you will, we'll still need to phase them. We'll still need to split them in smaller chunks, which is perfectly fine to do. But whenever we pull in a chunk or a phase, they'll also need to pass all of those gates. that's the idea. And I think it will enable a number of things, and I'll talk about that in a bit as well. So that's one thing I would like to change. So bigger patches into core, but when I pull them in, they're properly tested, they pass all of the gates. Another rule that I would like to introduce is that at no point in time we'll have more than 15 critical bugs. This might be a tough one, but we're going to try hard. But the idea basically is, for example, I will not pull in a big change if we know there's known bugs, which will increase the counter to be larger than 15. Or I will not pull in big new changes if the number of critical bugs are above 15. So before I pull in a new change, we'll have to reduce the number of critical bugs. And that gives us a few things. That gives us the ability to do timely releases, because we know that the Drupal release is at most 15 critical bugs away. And we sort of know that we can fix 15 critical bugs in maybe 2 or 3 weeks or in a couple of months, instead of a year or 2 years when we have 400 critical bugs. So I think those two things combined will help us and will provide some predictability in the release schedule. All right, so another thing I would like to do is for each of those initiatives, I would like to appoint an initiative owner. That's somebody that's going to be responsible for that initiative. It's sort of like a mini co-maintainer, if you will, for that particular initiative. And it's that person's task to coordinate with a lot of the other people. So the initiative owner, sorry, if you will work with the individual maintainers. At the same time, not everything needs to be an initiative, right? I'll continue to work with people directly as well. So it's not like I'll just work with the initiative owners. But I do believe that having initiative owners will allow us to scale and will also empower some people to make more decisions. And then my goal is to have a high bandwidth communication channel with those initiative owners. So it might be a weekly meeting in IRC or on Skype, or 1 or 2 meetings a month, whatever the right frequency is. So I'm going to make time to have that communication and to help guide those people where necessary. Let's see. All right, so will there be another co-maintainer? It's a good question. Some of the initiative owners, in a way, will be sort of mini co-maintainers. And I think that's probably the right thing to do, because just the amount of work that we put on Angie, I don't think is very realistic, nor is it scalable in the long term. So by doing these initiative owners, we solve some of those problems. And I would like to start with appointing those. It's going to take me maybe a couple of months to find them and to appoint them. And I want to get used to the system a little bit more before I might appoint 1 or 2 co-maintainers. So my immediate priority is to help appoint those initiative owners. So what makes a good initiative owner? It's sort of like a co-maintainer, really. There's a number of different skills that I would look out for in that person. I will say that we have a maintainers file, and the maintainers file has a lot of technical people. But for a good initiative owner, you don't need to be the architect of the initiative. I mean, you could be, but you don't have to be. Right? The other skills are also very important. So even if you want to work on something, it doesn't mean you need to be the person responsible for all the coordination. And I'll be very careful in my decision, like I've always been with co-maintainers as well. So something that I like to talk more about at this conference, if you have ideas for initiatives, or if you want to be an initiative owner, definitely approach me. We'll also talk about these things in the core conversations track. So before I talk a little bit about Drupal 8 and the features, I'd like to show you a few quotes that I collected on my website to ask people what is Drupal, and this is some of the feedback that they came back with. So I'll let you watch that for a minute.
On the